NATO has just frozen out Donald Trump, frozen him out. The President of the United States formally requested allied warships to help secure the Strait of Hormuz and America's closest allies, the nations bound by treaty to collective defense, the military alliance that has anchored Western security for 75 years, said no. Not we'll consider it, not let us consult with our parliaments, no. Trump launched an air campaign against Iran 2 weeks ago without consulting a single ally, not one phone call, not one briefing, not one diplomatic heads-up. He created the crisis, destabilized global energy markets, sent gasoline prices up 70 cents a gallon, and then demanded that the allies he has spent years insulting come rescue him from the consequences. And the allies, for the first time in modern memory, are watching an American president drown and choosing not to throw the rope. When I say NATO rejected Trump, I don't mean they expressed reservations. I don't mean they requested time to deliberate. I mean the military alliance that invoked Article 5 after September 11th, that sent troops to Afghanistan to fight alongside Americans for 20 years, that has treated American security interests as their own since 1949, looked at this request and collectively decided, not this time. Hit subscribe because what I'm about to walk you through represents the most significant fracture in the Western alliance since its founding, and it reveals exactly what happens when you spend years burning bridges and then need to cross one. Let me walk through what Trump actually asked for because the context makes it devastating. The Strait of Hormuz is currently impassable for commercial shipping. Oil tankers worth hundreds of millions of dollars are sitting idle rather than risk transit through waters that may be mined, may be targeted, may be contested. 20% of global oil supply flows through that strait under normal conditions. Those conditions no longer exist. Trump needs allied warships for minesweeping operations, for patrol and surveillance, for the kind of multinational presence that signals to commercial shipping that transit is safe. The United States Navy, despite being the most powerful naval force on Earth, cannot secure a 21-mile strait alone while simultaneously conducting ongoing military operations against Iran. He needs help. He asked for help. The allies said no. Trump stood in the White House on Monday, visibly frustrated, and complained that other nations were not enthusiastically responding to his request. They should be in here very happily helping us, he said. They should be jumping to help us because we've helped them for years. Stop and think about that framing. He's describing the most powerful military alliance in human history as if it were a favor bank, as if NATO membership means other countries owe the United States unconditional support for whatever military adventure an American president decides to launch, as if decades of collective security somehow obligate allies to clean up messes they had no role in creating. That is not how alliances work, that has never been how alliances work, and the allies just demonstrated that they understand this even if the American president does not. The rejection did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from years of insults, threats, and fundamental mischaracterization of what NATO actually is. Trump has spent nearly a decade describing NATO members as freeloaders. He has repeatedly claimed that other nations owe the United States money, as if the alliance operated like a protection racket rather than a mutual defense treaty. He has threatened to withdraw American support if other nations didn't pay up. John Bolton, who served as Trump's own national security advisor, disclosed that Trump had planned to withdraw from NATO entirely had he won re-election in 2020. This is not speculation from critics. This is testimony from someone who sat in the room. Bolton's assessment of the current situation was blunt. Trump doesn't understand how alliances work. He wants what he wants when he wants it. It's just that simple. And the insults continued after Trump returned to office. He called Canada, a NATO member that shares the world's longest undefended border with the United States, a future 51 Street state. He threatened military seizure of Greenland from Denmark, another NATO ally. Those threats, largely mocked as unserious in America, provoked months of crisis in Europe. European leaders watched, they remembered, and when the call for help came, they remembered everything. Let me put this in terms that make the psychology clear. Imagine spending years telling your neighbors they're worthless, that they don't contribute enough to the neighborhood, that you might stop protecting them from burglars, that you're considering taking their property by force. Then your house catches fire and you run outside, shouting for them to bring buckets. That is the diplomatic position the United States currently occupies. The house is on fire, the neighbors have buckets, and the neighbors are standing on their porches, arms crossed, watching. Trump repeated a claim on Monday that reveals either profound confusion or deliberate misrepresentation. I always said when in need they won't protect us. This statement is false, demonstrably, historically, provably false. NATO's Article 5, the mutual defense clause that forms the core of the alliance, states that an attack on one member is treated as an attack on all. It has been invoked exactly once in the alliance's 75-year history, after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks on the United States. NATO allies did not hesitate, they did not negotiate, they did not demand payment. They invoked Article 5 within 24 hours of the attacks and subsequently sent troops to Afghanistan, where many of them fought and died alongside American forces for 2 decades. When America was attacked, NATO responded. That is the historical record, that is the fact. What Trump is demanding now is categorically different. He is not asking allies to respond to an attack on the United States. He is asking allies to support an offensive military campaign that he launched without consulting them, against a nation that did not attack America first, in a manner that has destabilized global energy markets and raised fuel prices worldwide. Article 5 does not require NATO members to join offensive wars of choice. It never has. The treaty language is clear, the legal interpretation is settled, the alliance's 75-year practice confirms it. Jim Townsend, a former Defense Department staffer with extensive NATO experience, put it simply, he's so confused. He never did understand NATO. Let me be direct about what is actually happening in European capitals right now. Allied leaders are making calculations, cold, rational, strategic calculations about what's serving American interests under this president actually costs them domestically. European populations watched Trump threaten Denmark. They watched him call Canada a future state. They watched him launch an air campaign that spiked their fuel prices without a single courtesy call. They watched him demand reimbursement for American security commitments as if protection were a transaction rather than a treaty. Those populations vote. Those populations have opinions about sending their sailors into a contested waterway to help a president who has spent years treating their nations with contempt. Jan Tekow, with the Center for European Policy Analysis in Berlin, offered the clearest analysis. He looks at dependencies, power relationships. If he thinks he can put pressure on NATO members that way, he does it. But pressure requires leverage, and Trump has systematically destroyed his leverage by making alliance membership feel transactional rather than principled. If the relationship is purely about power and dependency, then allies will calculate purely based on power and dependency. And the calculation right now is that the costs of helping Trump exceed the costs of refusing. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to commercial shipping. Oil prices remain elevated. American gasoline prices are up 70 cents per gallon and climbing. The energy crisis Trump created continues, and the allied support that might help resolve it is not coming. This is what isolation looks like for a superpower. Not military weakness, not economic decline, simply discovering that when you need friends, you have spent years ensuring you don't have any. The ships exist, the minesweepers exist, the capabilities exist across a dozen allied nations, but the willingness to deploy them in support of an American president who has treated the alliance as a protection scheme, who has threatened allied territory, who launched a war without consultation and then demanded cleanup assistance, does not exist. Trump is learning, perhaps for the first time, that relationships matter, that how you treat allies during peacetime determines whether they help you during crisis, that 75 years of collective security can be undermined by a decade of insults and a fundamental failure to understand what an alliance actually is. The warships are not coming. The allies have made their position clear, and somewhere in the Strait of Hormuz, oil tankers sit waiting for safe passage that is not arriving because the president who needs help has spent years ensuring he would not receive it. The fire is burning, the neighbors have buckets, and the neighbors remember everything. Stay watching. This fracture is not healing. Thanks for watching.